Hey, this is Ramley, and I'm here with Clay from Spindows. I actually met him. He's one of my fellow Lean Startup speaker, and he had this story that he told me about how he applied Lean Startup to the extreme. So, can you tell me a little bit about Spindows first, Clay?
Yeah, sure. Spindows is an enterprise discovery platform, and what that means basically is, like, Ronley, you and I could both work for the New York office of Accenture for 20 years and never meet each other, even though we are both interested in hip hop and basketball, and we both do marketing, we both do whatever. If you're in, let's say, the government segment and I'm in the healthcare segment, these enterprise companies are so big that they can't even find relevant people. If you think about when Steve Jobs went to Pixar, they were going to put all the illustrators in one building and all the executives in another building and all the
I
animators in
see.
another building. And he said, no, there's no way we're doing that. These collisions are important. What Tony Hsieh now calls collisions
Mm,
are important and critical to innovation. And in a work, so he built this big, beautiful atrium and had everyone go through that, and it created a lot of collisions. And Tony Hsieh is doing the same thing with Zappos, their headquarters now, and having everyone go through the same, entryway at the Zappos headquarters. But we're living in a world where more and more we're not going to a building to go to work, right? You're not at a building, I'm not at a building, and so Spindos is a tool that's designed to help big companies create more of those collisions that lead to innovation in using the internet instead of using a physical building or a physical atrium.
no, that's definitely true. It's a big part of innovation is being able to really collaborate with people.
Right.
Now, when you told me this story of how you saved a little bit over $100,000 in development through customer development, can you tell
Yeah.
people that story, that specific story that you have?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Like you, I've been, following the lean stuff for a long time and reading it, now teaching it and speaking about it.
Nice.
And it was really fun to not just uh, apply it conceptually, but really apply it to my own startup. It's fun to take a concept that you read about in a book and then actually do it. And so with Spindows, my initial concept was more like sort of chat roulette for the Fortune 500 or like airtime, neither of which were super successful on their own, but I thought that there was something very interesting about rapid video speed networking. So what we're doing right now, let's say limited to 4 minutes, and then boom, I click over to somebody else, and I click over to Eric, and I click over to Sarah. That was, all the founders get stuck in their founder vision and sort of try to convince the world that that's what they want. So I did the lean thing. I worked with my designer to mock up a bunch of beautiful screens, turned it into a clickable prototype on an iPad where you can
Nice.
click around or click around online. I think we used Photoshop and then InVision app to create the clickable prototype. There was no database, no backend behind it, and showed it to a bunch of companies. I got the meetings. I was very honest and said, "There's nothing behind this, but where would you click? What do you think? Do you have this problem? What would you do?" And almost to a person or to a company, they all said the same thing, which is um, the video speed networking piece is kind of out there. It's kind of Star
Mhm.
Trek for us. Like, we maybe don't even have webcams, or we're on Internet Explorer 7, or our security team won't allow us to do video speed networking. But the directory piece of just people discovery and finding people by tags. So the way Spindows works is there's work tags, which are kind of like skills, like marketing, social media, lean startup, that kind of stuff. And then there's personal tags, which are more like interests, like wine and snowboarding and things like that. So they said, that part is really interesting. And I said, well, that's basically just a search directory for people. And all the companies said, yeah, we can't do that today. We have, Microsoft SharePoint or something like that. And so after I heard that enough times, it was an interesting thing, because I think without Lean Startup, I wouldn't have even asked that question. I would have spent $100,000 and been wrong about what the market wanted. And then the other thing the whole Lean Startup thing did is it made me feel, very much okay to be wrong, and very much okay to say, have the customers say, we just want this search directory. I said, okay, that's much easier to build. I was able to build that, relatively cheaply, and then continue to meet with them and continue to iterate. And now we're moving beyond the initial thing and saying, okay, what about how do the current kind of hypothesis we're working through is, how do we get the tags in the system? How do I get into the system that you like hip hop and wine and CrossFit, right? Or that you're good at lean startup and startups and things like that. And so that's kind of what we're currently iterating on. But it's a lot of fun to have a customer say, no, we only want 10% of what your initial vision was, and that's really interesting. So that was fun.
I think that's the greatest learning of not coding right away. And I'm a Ruby on Rails coder myself, and my previous startup I've done the same thing. What would be your advice to somebody who's very technical and he's like, I'm just gonna build this shit?
Yeah.
Like, what would you tell that guy?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I wish I had your technical chops or a lot of people's technical chops, and I wish I could just build those things in a sense. But what I would say is use that as a strength because you can turn proven validations into code and product much more quickly. It's even more like now, it's still hard for me to, I have to hire people and work with people and work with others to get this stuff coded, but anyone can do what I did, and, using free or cheap mock-up tools. Now there's other cool things like Webflow and Foundation and Bootstrap and all these things where, sure, go ahead and use your understanding of CSS and HTML and things like that to build. You can build a more functional prototype than I build. Mine was just Kinotopia and Photoshop and whatever. So if you want to use a little bit of code to build something slightly more functional, do that, and then you can, change the code a little bit. But what I would say is don't build keep it all front end, and don't build the back end until you have a bunch of customers that not only say they want it, but prove that they want it, either with a credit card or by putting stuff out there. Because I see, having learned this stuff and consult and mentor a lot of startups, when I mentor at like Startup Weekend, I'm like a bird pushing the kitties out of the nest. I'm like, you got to go out there. You're in New York City. Go to Times Square and talk to people. Try to get email addresses. Try to get credit card numbers. It's okay to sort of fake it and see if people sign up. But with the technical chops, it's like when you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. And when you can build product in Ruby, then you figure that that's what you want to do. But like all the lean stuff that we've studied, the biggest waste is building stuff people don't want, and I'm living proof of that. I almost built something very complex and very expensive that nobody wanted, or at the very least they weren't ready for, right? Like Mark Andreessen was right about the cloud, but he was 10 years too early when it was way, way too expensive. Yeah. So it was expensive to be that early, and maybe I'm too early with video speed networking for the enterprise, but I'm happy to solve the fact that in a big company, you and I couldn't find each other. If you and I worked for Accenture, Microsoft SharePoint doesn't do a good job of helping us discover and connect with each other, and so it's a very fun, very simple problem to solve, right? And if you look at all the great startups nowadays, Airbnb, Dropbox, Evernote, they all solve one very simple problem and do it very well. So I'm trying to solve people discovery and helping people find their colleagues, basically.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I definitely love your background. Like you said you're 10 years with Accenture, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was a problem that I experienced at Accenture. Being there 10 years, I only met 100 people. I mean, I met 100 people at the Lean Startup Conference, probably when you and I spoke. So the structure is not designed to help you maximize the number of connections you make, and so that's what I'm trying to help fix.
That's awesome. And you did an MBA with Seth Godin. That must have been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was a huge fan of Seth for years. I discovered his work in about 2003. I was flying through the airport and grabbed Purple Cow, the book, and it totally changed how I think about business. And then I subscribed to his blog and read all his other books and things like that, and tried to bring some of that innovation into my former employer, into Accenture, and at least maybe it was at the level I was at, but I really think it's just more the culture of the company. They're good at doing big, huge projects and then doing them for the other top 25 companies. They're not really about innovation and inventing new things. And so my innovation, pounding that drum wasn't met with that much support. So when Seth said, come study with me in my office for 6 months, I jumped at the chance, and I was lucky enough to get in. And he's so brilliant, and people pay a lot of money to hear him speak for an hour, so to spend 6 months with him at his desk in his office was really just life-changing, and I owe a ton to him and to others that I've learned from.
Nice. So where can people find you or your project on the web?
Sure. My site is clayhebert.com. The last name is Hebert, and you can find me on Twitter at clayhebert. Anywhere on the web, I'm Clay Hebert, and Spindows is at spindows.com.
Nice, nice. Well, thanks so much for your time. I'm just gonna stop the broadcast, but you can stay on the line and we can chat for a little bit more.
Sounds great. Thanks, Romley.
Thanks.